There is a bird that comes to your yard that you recognize, not because it has a tag or a band or any marking you put there. You recognize it the way you recognize a neighbor you've seen 100 times, by the way it moves, by where it always lands, by something in its particular presence that has become familiar to you over weeks or months of mornings. Maybe you've given it a name. Maybe you haven't gone that far, but you've thought of it as yours. Your cardinal, your chickadee, the one that always comes to the feeder when you're the one who filled it. Most people who feel this way about a bird talk themselves out of it. They decide they're projecting. They tell themselves that all cardinals look the same, that the bird doesn't know them from any other human, that what feels like recognition is just a pattern they've imposed on something random. Here is what the science says. They are wrong. The bird you think of as yours has been watching you for months. It has recorded details about you, your face, your movements, your schedule, your sounds, with a precision that most people never allow themselves to believe a bird is capable of. And what it has done with that information is something that will change the way you look at every bird that has ever visited your yard. Welcome to Secret Life of Birds. Subscribe before you leave, because what you are about to learn is one of the most remarkable things happening in your yard right now, and almost nobody knows the full shape of it.
Today, we are going into the science of what birds actually remember about the humans in their lives, how long they hold that memory, what they do with it, and what it means that a wild creature with a brain the size of a walnut has been quietly building a file on you for months. Stay until the end, because the last thing we cover is the one that changes not just how you see your birds, but how you see yourself in relationship to the wild world just outside your door. And it is the one most people say stopped them completely when they first understood it. Part 1. The research that changed everything. In 2009, a team of researchers at the University of Washington conducted an experiment that the scientific community found genuinely difficult to process at first. They wanted to know whether American crows could recognize individual human faces, not human presence in general, not the broad category of human as potential threat, specific faces, individual people. To test this, researchers wore latex masks, a specific dangerous face that had been used to capture and band crows, and a neutral control face, and walked through areas where crow populations had been studied. The crows who had been captured while the dangerous mask was being worn responded with alarm and mobbing behavior whenever that specific mask appeared, even when worn by a completely different person, even when that person changed their clothing, their posture, their hat. They were not responding to a smell. They were not responding to a body type. They were responding to a face, a specific arrangement of features that their visual system had encoded, stored, and was now matching against incoming visual data with enough accuracy to trigger a specific behavioral response weeks and months after the initial encounter.
But here is what pushed the research further into territory that surprised even the scientists conducting it. Crows who had never personally been captured, juvenile birds, birds who had simply been present in the area, began responding to the dangerous mask with the same avoidance behavior as the birds who had direct experience with it. The facial recognition had been socially transmitted. One crow had learned your face, and then it had told other crows. The implications of this for your backyard are not abstract. The birds in your yard are operating with a facial recognition system that is, in the ways that matter most, more sophisticated than most people ever imagine when they look out their kitchen window at the feeder. Part 2. What your specific bird has been recording. Crows are the most studied example, but they are not the only one. The facial recognition research has been extended and supported across multiple species, and what has emerged is a picture of bird memory that is far richer and more specific than the science imagined even 20 years ago. Black-capped chickadees, the small, common, seemingly unremarkable bird that visits feeders across North America, have a hippocampus that expands measurably during the fall caching season. The hippocampus is the region of the brain most associated with spatial memory, and in humans, with the formation and retrieval of long-term memories.
In chickadees, it physically grows to accommodate the thousands of individual cache locations the bird needs to remember across a single winter. What researchers have found is that this same memory architecture, this same capacity for detailed, specific, long-term retention applies not just to food cache locations, but to individuals in the chickadee's environment, including humans. A chickadee that visits your feeder regularly is not storing a generic impression of human. It is storing a specific representation of you, your face, your typical clothing colors, your movement patterns, your behavioral signature, and it is updating that representation every single time you appear.
Think about what that means in practice. Every morning you have stood at your feeder. Every time you have moved through your yard. Every time you have looked out your window. The chickadee on the branch above the feeder has been adding to its file on you, refining its model, sharpening the representation. By the time a chickadee has been visiting your yard for 3 or 4 months, its internal model of you is detailed enough to detect when you are wearing something different, moving at an unusual pace, or behaving in any way that deviates from the pattern it has come to know as you. You have not been watching a bird. You have been being studied.
Part 3. How long the memory actually lasts. This is the question most people ask when they first understand the depth of what birds remember, because the answer has implications that take a moment to absorb. Research on long-term memory retention in corvids, crows, jays, ravens, has documented individual recognition of specific humans maintained across periods of years, not weeks, not months, years. Crows in the University of Washington studies maintained their specific response to the dangerous mask face across the full duration of the study period, more than 5 years of continued observation. For smaller songbirds, the data is less extensive, simply because the studies are harder to conduct, but what exists is consistent with the pattern. Birds that have formed strong associations with specific humans, particularly positive associations built around reliable food sources and non-threatening behavior, show recognition behavior that persists across seasonal absences, across physical changes in the human's appearance, and across gaps in contact that would seem, from a human perspective, long enough to be forgotten.
What this means for you is this. The bird you think of as yours, the one that has been coming to your feeder since last spring, since the winter before last, since however long you have been maintaining your yard, has not been starting fresh each morning. It has been accumulating. Everything it has learned about you since the first time it saw your face has been retained and added to and refined into a representation that is, by now, genuinely specific to you. The cardinal that comes to your feeder is not seeing a human. It is seeing you. And it has been seeing you specifically for longer than you probably realize. Part 4. What it told the other birds. We covered the social transmission of crow facial recognition earlier, the finding that individual crows share information about specific humans with other members of their group. But this sharing of information about humans extends beyond corvids and beyond alarm responses.
The alarm call system of small songbirds, the network of interspecies communication that runs through your yard every morning, carries information about individuals, not just categories. When a chickadee produces its alarm call in response to a human, the number of D syllables at the end of the call encodes information about the threat level of that specific individual. A human the chickadee has classified as safe produces a different call, or no alarm call at all, than a human the chickadee has classified as unknown or threatening. Every bird in your yard that hears those calls is receiving information about you specifically. The nuthatch, the titmouse, the goldfinches at the thistle feeder, the juncos on the ground. All of them are updating their individual assessments of you based on what the chickadee broadcasts every time you appear. Your reputation in your yard is not held by one bird. It is distributed across a network of species that communicate with each other constantly in a language you are only beginning to understand,
about individuals, including you, that matter to the shared life of that community.
When you step outside tomorrow morning and the yard stays alive around you, when the birds keep feeding, keep singing, keep going about their morning as if your presence is simply part of the world they live in, that is not accident. That is a collective assessment that has been communicated across species, refined over time, and is being confirmed again right now. They have discussed you. They have reached a conclusion, and the conclusion is good. Part 5. The moment recognition becomes relationship. There is a difference between a bird that has learned to tolerate a human and a bird that has formed something that functions in the ways that matter, like a relationship with one. The tolerance threshold is relatively easy to cross. Consistent presence, consistent food, consistent non-threatening behavior. These things, maintained over time, will reduce a bird's alarm response to a specific human to near zero. The bird learns that this human equals safety and food, and it adjusts its behavior accordingly. But researchers studying long-term interactions between specific birds and specific humans have documented something that goes beyond tolerance, something that looks, from the outside, like preference.
Birds that have been interacting with a specific trusted human over an extended period will, in some documented cases, approach that human more closely than the food source alone would require. They will orient toward that human when other options are available. They will, in some instances, produce contact calls, the soft conversational sounds birds use to maintain cohesion with familiar individuals, in the presence of that human. Contact calls are not produced toward threats. They are not produced toward strangers. They are the sounds birds make toward members of their own community, toward individuals they have assessed as belonging to the same world they belong to. If you have ever been standing in your yard and heard a soft, quiet chip from a bird nearby, not an alarm, not a territorial song, just a small sound directed in your direction, you have been spoken to. Not metaphorically. In the most literal sense available to that bird, it was talking to you, telling you it was there, acknowledging your presence in the way it acknowledges the presence of the other birds it trusts. You were included. In the community of your yard, by the bird that knew you best, you were included.
Part 6. What it means that a wild thing chose to know you. I want to end with something that I think is worth sitting with for more than a moment. The bird that has been watching you for months did not have to do that. It is not obligated by instinct to form a specific representation of a specific human. It could have maintained a generic category, large bipedal creature, approach with caution, and managed its survival perfectly well on that basis. Many birds do exactly that with the humans in their environment and live full lives. Your bird went further. It looked at you, specifically you, and decided you were worth knowing. It invested the cognitive resources to build a model of you that is detailed enough to detect when you are wearing a different color, moving at an unusual pace, having a hard day. It has been maintaining and updating that model every morning for months. It has shared what it knows about you with the other birds in your yard.
It did this because you gave it a reason to, because you showed up, because you filled the feeder and changed the water and moved through your yard with enough consistency and calm that a small wild creature decided over time that you were safe, that you were reliable, that you were worth the cognitive investment of being truly known. There is a version of this that is purely scientific, a set of mechanisms and adaptations and survival calculations that produced this behavior as an output. That version is real, and it is remarkable. And there is another version, which is also real, which is simply this. A wild thing looked at you and chose to remember you. Out of everything in its world that it could have classified as irrelevant, it classified you as worth knowing, worth watching,
worth carrying. You have been remembered by something wild, something that owes you nothing and chose to know you anyway. The next time your bird comes to the feeder, the one you think of as yours, the one that always lands in the same spot, the one you've been watching for longer than you've admitted, I want you to let that land, not just as a fact, as the gift it actually is.
Tell me in the comments about the bird you think of as yours. What species is it? How long it's been coming? Whether you've named it, even in your head. Whether there was a specific moment when you looked at each other and something shifted. I read every single one of these, and I mean it when I say the stories this community shares are the ones I carry the longest. I'll see you in the next one.